Sometimes you get really lucky. Other times, you're lucky if you get what you paid for. And of course, I'm talking about cheap tools. There are lots of tools out there on the market these days. There are mail order import places, which is where these came from. These came from Vivor. They were sending me tools to look at and review last year. We did a number of videos on their products, and I'll kind of summarize my thoughts here in a minute. But there are other places like Harbor Freight and who knows how many other cheap import tool places there are. They all have a lot of things in common though, and that is that element of luck. Some people are lucky enough they get a tool that's great, it lasts for years, performs flawlessly, and they are thrilled with it. Other people get tools that barely function, if at all. There was one thing they sent me, an arbor press, that I never did the video on because it was just too loose and sloppy. Somebody wants to spend some time tightening things, maybe machining some of the surfaces to get everything to run smoother, can probably make a decent arbor press out of it. But I wasn't going to mess with it, so I never did that video. Matter of fact, that's when I quit doing videos for them. And I've had some viewers on these little forges. Now this forge was one of the things that really outperformed my expectations for it. It was a good little forge. I used it quite a bit over in the little shop. There were times that, not even doing videos, that I just needed a quick little heat. This was the ideal forge for that. It was a pretty good tool. And it still is. I put a different gas forge over there on the coal forge just because I already had it and I hadn't been using it. And I'm going to pass this one on to somebody else that actually needs a forge. But this turned out to not be a bad tool. And the little anvils that they sent out, which is what started me down that rabbit hole, were very functional little anvils. For the price, they were perfectly worth every penny you paid for them. They were going to do the job, a great little beginner's anvil. I still don't see a problem with those other than the fact they're imports, but so many things are imports these days that it's hard to get away from it. But back to this forge, sorry I got distracted there. Some of the viewers have reported back to me that they have had leaks in the connections on the hoses, and they have not been able to correct those. There's just nothing they've been able to do. My advice for that would be to just go ahead and take it off here, find another hose with the proper fitting. It might be metric. You might have to do some adapting of fittings here somehow, which makes it a bigger pain. And it's going to cost you more money if you have to do that. Maybe even replace the regulator, because the regulator is permanently attached to this hose, so you need to buy a better regulator. But at that point, you've just got a forge body and a better regulator and better hose. You may never want for a better forge than that. But if you buy a tool like this, and that was what your budget allowed, whatever, $120, $150, whatever these are selling for, was your maximum budget for a tool, and suddenly you got to make repairs on a brand new tool, or deal with returning a tool from a major company that doesn't always have the best reputation for customer service, it gets to be a real pain. If the tool works for you, that's great. And I think most people that bought these were happy with them. They certainly did the job they were supposed to, unless you got one of those that had problems with the hose fittings. But between those reports and the bad arbor press that I had, I just kind of got to the point that I don't really want to be doing reviews on these. I don't think I ever told anybody, this is the best tool in the world, you'll never want a better tool than this. Because honestly, I believe you should buy the best tools that you can afford. And maybe these are the best tools you can afford. It's better to have a tool that's a little bit frustrating, maybe doesn't quite meet all of your expectations, but actually gets the job done, than it is to not be able to get the job done. Sometimes you have to invest in a tool that isn't really what you want, get the work done, continue to progress. Maybe you're making a profit off of the work you're doing with the cheaper tools and can eventually put that money into a better tool. And by then you'll know more what you want for a tool. The real downside though is when you buy a tool like this and it just doesn't really do what you want. It frustrates you, you can't get the job done, you have to find some other way to do the job. and now you got to deal with returning it or getting a replacement for it. Maybe you can't ever do that and you're just out the money. My view on a lot of these things is that they are semi-disposable tools. You use them till they don't work anymore, then you throw it away and you replace it, because you're not going to get spare parts, and probably none of the service centers that you've got around you are going to want to work on any of this stuff. They want to work on the name brand stuff, the stuff they can easily get parts for. But this stuff did work. It did the minimum it was supposed to do and would get the job done. And if you only had one or two jobs you needed the tool for, they're probably okay. For me though, this just isn't what I want to use. I want to use tools that I'm happy with. I don't want to use tools that make me grip my teeth and mumble under my breath. And so I prefer to do without a tool if I can find some other way to get the job done without spending the money on a cheap tool. Save my money, try and budget later to buy the better tool, or maybe I've got the money and I was just hoping I didn't have to spend it and I end up buying the better tool because I really did need that tool. But after 40 years of being in blacksmithing, I'm at a point where budget-friendly, cheap tools don't really suit me that well. Now, I did use this plasma cutter some, and this is one of the tools that ended up costing me a lot more money because somebody gave me this tool for free. Here's a free tool, please do a review on it. And it ends up costing me several $1,000s. Now, how does that work? Well, that's because this was just useful enough to see the value in having a plasma cutter in the shop. I had one many years ago. It was before plasma cutters were anywhere near as good as they are now. It did not perform as well as this does. It was a name brand one back then. I don't remember who made it, but it was one I bought at a local welding shop. It was rated for 1/8" material. It would do 16 gauge very nicely, barely cut 1/8 inch, and it was an ugly cut, did better with a torch. So I ended up selling that plasma cutter and then went without a plasma cutter for at least 20 years because I just found other ways to do things. Then they gave me this one for free, did a video on it. Yeah, it works, not the best in the world. But I had a few other things I needed to cut. I needed to cut some round discs for some candle holders. I didn't want to go spend the money on a hole saw that exact size. Hole saws work, I've done that before. But I needed a size I didn't have a hole saw for. So I used this plasma cutter to cut it out. Kind of a rough cut, kind of snaggy. No matter how I set this, the cut never seems to improve that much. But between that project and a couple other projects, I recognized that, having a plasma cutter in the shop might be something I would like to have, and I started looking for one. So I went ahead and invested in a name brand plasma cutter. It's about the same size footprint. This is the Hypertherm 45 Sync. It's one of their newer machines. I probably would have been happy with the old one, but those were kind of out of stock in our local shop. And this is the one they were getting in at that point. So this is the one I bought. As far as functionality goes, this is 100 times better. It makes such a smoother cut. It is no hassle, no problems. This has a built-in air regulator, so you set the power setting on this and it adjusts the air for you, which is kind of nice. You don't have to worry about fiddling with it. That other one, I fiddled with it up, down, didn't matter, different power settings, and it seemed like everything was always the same. I never really saw any improvement one way or the other. And this one, you can tell, you change the power a little bit, you get a different quality of cut depending on how thick the material is. It's also fairly smart technology, which maybe is something I don't really care about. It keeps track of the hours of use on the tip that you have in it. It's not that multi-part system that has several different pieces you have to replace. This is a single piece. All of that comes as one unit. And somehow the machine knows when it was installed, how many hours of use you have on it, and what kind of performance you're getting out of it. So it will tell you when you need to replace the tip. And somehow, because that tip syncs with the machine, that's why they call it the sync model, it knows what kind of a tip you have in there. Do you have a drag tip in there? Do you have a gouging tip in there? I think there are 5 or 6 different styles of cartridges, they call them. They don't actually call them tips now. But depending on the cartridge you put on there, it will adjust the parameters of the machine to suit that cartridge based on the power level you set. So the only thing you ever have to set is this one knob right here on the front. Like I say, it's got built-in regulator, built-in air filter, Hypertherm recommends a redundant air filter to put in line before this, which I've done. So I've got another air filter that goes into the air line. It filters and dries the air. Then it goes into the one in the machine, which further filters and dries the air. But that way the one in the machine will last longer because it'll be a little bit more difficult to change it. It is kind of on the outside where you can get to it, but it's not as convenient as one mounted to the wall. So this thing was about a $2,500 investment before you start buying tips, or if you got to run airlines or any of that kind of stuff, which right now I'm just dragging a hose over and plugging it into that redundant filter. But that's a lot of money compared to what Vevor charges for their cheap plasma cutter. For me, I think it's worth it. I enjoy using this machine. I didn't enjoy using the other one. I will use this way more as opposed to avoiding using it like I would have the other one. So I think it's worth it. But I wasn't looking for a plasma cutter when they sent me the free one. Somebody else had mentioned in the comments that they had a friend that worked in the plasma cutter industry, and they said the best thing to ever happen to their industry was Harbor Freight selling cheap plasma cutters, because I think a lot of other people buy a cheap one, realize how useful it should be, and then buy the machine they should have bought in the first place. Now, another tool they sent me that I was disappointed with how well it worked. I expected a little bit more out of, but it lived up to the minimum standards. This little welder did weld things together. I did some test welds. We made some little tools to use over in the other shop, bending jigs and some spring folders, things like that. Those tools work fine. Welds are ugly, but they're solid enough for what they needed to be. I've even taken this back over to the little shop and run it off an extension cord when I put the electric blower on that forge, because I needed to weld up a bracket for the electric blower that I had. The old bracket was for a different blower, so I had to change things around. And this was a lot easier to take over there than my other welder that's hooked up to a gas bottle. But it's still frustrating. It doesn't seem to want to hold an arc. It kind of pulses in and out and just isn't the best welder in the world. And there's a chance that if I decide I need a welder of this size in the future, that I would go ahead and buy one from Lincoln, Miller, Everlast, ESAB, one of the companies that makes good quality products. Not a bad thing to have around, and one of these little welders in this size that works reliably would do most of what you need to do in a blacksmith shop if welding isn't your thing. If all you need to do is weld up jigs and fixtures, maybe weld a temporary handle onto a big piece of material so you can get it in and out of the forge easily. Lots of things like that can be done with just a simple little stick welder. So it's got some potential. So this size welder has some potential. This one just is frustrating enough that I'm probably not going to use it again. Now, if Lincoln, Miller, Everlast, ESAB, one of those companies would like to sponsor a video and have me review their welder, I'd be happy to take a look at that. But so far, none of those companies have asked to sponsor a video. For that matter, this video is not sponsored by Vevor. This is not a promotional video for them. This is just getting my thoughts about cheap tools and kind of why I don't invest my own money in these kinds of tools. Neither am I sponsored by Hypertherm, paid full price for the plasma cutter. As far as the mag drill goes, this may have been one of the better power tools that they sent me. It seemed to work pretty well. I didn't have any real issues with it, but I also didn't use it that much because I already own a mag drill and I just didn't see any reason to get serious about this. I always knew I was going to give this one away, which brings up what's going to happen to all these tools. They aren't the best things in the world, but they aren't garbage. They will meet a minimum standard to get some sort of a job done. So if people need these tools, they should have access to these tools, whether that means you're buying them new, or in my case, I have Rocky Mountain Smiths coming over for the monthly demo this weekend. I'm putting all of these tools and a whole bunch of other stuff that I haven't used in years, from vices to forge blowers, some old winches, chain hoists. I got all sorts of stuff I'm putting out, and it's just free. I'm not going to ask anybody to pay for it. If they want to donate a few dollars to help support the channel, that's fine. But if people actually need these tools to get work done in their shop, I want these tools to be available. There's 2 forges, 2 anvils, 2 vices, a mag drill, a little welder, a little plasma cutter, welding helmet. I don't even know what else I've got going. Why I'm telling you this, I don't really know. That event would have been 1 or 2 weeks in the past, so by the time you see this, you've already missed that opportunity. So hopefully, if you're in the area and you're paying attention to the Rocky Mountain Smiths website, hopefully you're a member, you already knew about the event, and you will be here, and you might have been able to take one of these things home with you. So again, my goal today is not to talk you out of buying these quality of tools. If this is what fits your budget and it fits your style of work, if you're a hobbyist, these tools make a lot more sense. Blacksmithing is still how I make most of my income, and I really do need tools that I can count on that don't frustrate me, and they help my work go just a little bit smoother. Now, as far as doing tool reviews, like I said, if one of those big name companies wants to send me a welder, I would do a review on that, but I'm not, something flying around there, but I'm not doing cheap tool reviews anymore. I probably get a half dozen offers from various cheap tool companies. Vivor reaches out to me regularly, says, hey, we'd like to send you something else, and I'm not doing any of those reviews because they aren't really the tools that I use in my shop. Plenty of people out there doing reviews on the cheap tools. If you need to know whether or not they suit your purposes, I strongly encourage you to check out some of those videos. For that matter, I'm also not doing sponsorships anymore for non-blacksmithing related things. In the past, I've done some sponsored videos for businesses and services that I actually use and was glad to have access to, was glad to work with them, but they probably don't add much value to you as a blacksmithing community, and I'm just really not doing videos like that anymore. Does take a lot of money out of my pocket. That was about 15% of my income last year, was to do these sponsored videos, because they do pay a little bit, and the non-blacksmithing related ones pay more, $500–600, which is still cheap for a sponsored video. The tool reviews were considerably less than that, and unfortunately the blacksmithing related reviews are generally even less than that, because the blacksmithing businesses that I would prefer to work with tend to have a pretty low advertising budget, and I'm not here to take advantage of those people. I want you to know where you can get the products and the services you need. So if I'm doing a video for Blacksmith Supply, Ken's Custom Iron, Pay Tool, the Blacksmithing Conservancy, or any of these other businesses or organizations that provide the tools, the equipment, the materials that you need as a blacksmith, I'm not charging all that much for those videos, but those are the kind of sponsorships that I'm going to continue to do going forward. And if I'm doing tool reviews, they have to be a tool that I'm glad to have in my shop. So cheap budget tools that I wouldn't spend my own money on, I'm not going to be doing those reviews anymore. But if there are companies out there making good quality tools that I would actually consider spending my own money for and would actually find use for in my shop, I'd be happy to work with those companies. So that's what you can expect going forward as far as sponsored videos go on Black Bear Forge. But I think I've pretty nearly beat this subject to death, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I got more work to do today to get ready for the demo this weekend. Hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but have fun, stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we will see you for the next video.